they're going to text them to me.
Just you.
I will prompt it. Good afternoon, Bethesda community. Thank you for joining us for this live Q&A event after us releasing our roadmap to return to our community. I'm joined here by Mrs. Jones and Mrs. Chadwick. Thank you for being here. And as promised, in the middle of June, we wanted to come back to you as a community and have a chance to be able to share some time with questions and answers. And there are many of you who have already submitted those answers online, which has allowed us to prepare prior to this event to be able to share with you. Much preparation has taken place thus far, and you can imagine that the amount of time and effort of this team has progressed over the course of this entire summer. So thank you for being patient with us, but also for trusting us with this important responsibility. We take very seriously the return to our campus on August the 19th. We know that those days are moving forward, and we're excited about being back on campus. And so we wanted to be able to give information to you in a timely response, but also in a way that is going to be taking into account what information we have from state and local governments as it stands today. And so we thank you for engaging with us on that. I'd also just like to add that we have shared this information with our staff earlier on in this week, and we've engaged with them already to get some feedback and dialogue from them, so our staff is well prepared and supportive of this document too. And we thank all of our teachers and staff who have been working extremely hard in preparation for the school year to come. And so by doing that, we wanted to offer the same process to you as families, that we would present you a written document form, give you a chance to just read it and digest it, and then hopefully have some questions that you could submit online. We will also be taking questions live during the Facebook session, so as those questions come about, feel free to add those in, and we'll try to address them as best as we can up here. There was a large response of questions already prior to the event today, which is great because we have some themes and categories now that we will be responding to. And so we're going to start by addressing some of those themes and categories, and then if other questions come in live, we'll address those as well. So let me just start. There's been some questions already that have been addressing regarding our campus and the function of the day-to-day with campus visitors and how lunches are going to work. Mrs. Chadwick, can you start by sharing a little bit about the lunches and campus visitation and what that's going to look like?
Absolutely. First of all, one of the most recent questions we had would you still be able to order the hot lunches from the vendors? And yes, we are still planning on doing that. Our lunch manager, Miss Sherry, many of you know her, is busy this summer meeting with our vendors to work out menu items that can be individually wrapped and delivered. So that will save on the contact of food, and more items that are safer that way. Plus, we always work with vendors that go through the health department guidelines for their restaurants, and we will still be doing that. At this time, our students will be eating lunch outside of their classrooms in different designated areas of the building as cohorts. We will not be having visitors during lunch, at least at the beginning of the year, until we evaluate how it's going first with all these new protocols.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And you brought up a word that is new to us, and Mrs. Jones, maybe you can help dive down into that, the whole concept of cohorts, and then how that's impactful and why we're doing that.
Some of the most recent information that's come out from the American Academy of Pediatrics put a strong recommendation on the idea of cohorts, and they were really introducing that as a healthy part of a back-to-school plan. And so for kindergarten through 6th grade, each of those grade levels will have contact with the people within that grade level. We're calling that a cohort. So there will be times when both of the 4th grade classes have contact with one another, but there would be every plan in place to keep 4th grade isolated from 3rd grade and 5th grade. So each of those grade levels will function as a cohort. 7th and 8th grade, especially during math time, do have some contact with one another, and so that creates one cohort for 7th and 8th grade, realizing that they do have some teachers in common with one another. And then 9th through 12th grade will be a single cohort for the same reasons that they do share teachers and have classes that they are in the same room at the same time with one another. And so that's the logical grouping for them, that 9th through 12th grade will be their own cohort.
Right.
Could I also address 6th grade? They do have more than one teacher. They're not like the self-contained K through 5. However, the 6th grade does have kind of a modified self-contained and changed class schedule. So some of their teachers are the same for most of the morning, and then they will be having their other teachers for those other classes. But when we talk about sanitation of classrooms and changing classes, but for the most part, 6th grade will be on their own.
Right. I appreciate that we're diving down into that, because the concept here in terms of a return to our campus, as we dialogued about a month ago, is we are focusing our efforts on a modified return to campus. And all of our efforts have worked towards the recommendations that we've seen from the American Academy of Pediatrics and the CDC, and we've even been engaging in the national dialogue for opening schools safely. And as we've listened and paid attention, that the reality is that they are recommending all schools, that's across the nation, but all schools, to prepare for a return to our campus safely. And that's what we're preparing for now. Doesn't mean that we want to be transparent about the fact that we recognize if there's a hybrid return that has to happen, or resurgent returns that has to happen. We know that we have planning in place for those to take place as well. But we want you as families to start thinking and preparing for what an on-campus return to look like. And I know that that brings a sense of needed understanding for safety and the precautions about that. We will address in this session later. But I want to just talk about kind of the campus as a whole. Okay. You want to go ahead on the cohort?
I forgot
Sorry.
one thing. Okay, so specifically to 5th grade families, that cohort is expanding. The youngest member on campus is a part of that cohort. Mrs. Haley Bell is expecting a new arrival. Congratulations to the Bell family. So our youngest BCS student
Right.
is expected to arrive in November. And we had some parents ask about how that cohort would work. In the past, our 5th graders taking an advanced math class or an accelerated math class went over to the middle school to be able to do that. But in order to plan ahead specifically for the 5th grade cohort, we have added a new staff member. So we are excited to add Hannah Cook to the 5th grade teaching team. She has a background teaching elementary school as well as having taught middle school math. And so she is an ideal candidate and a great fit for that position. Hannah Cook will be teaching that accelerated 5th grade math class and will be part of that 5th grade cohort for the entire school year. But she will also be the person responsible for covering the maternity leave that Mrs. Bell will enjoy with her new bundle later this school year. So that cohort will have an extra teacher to make sure that our elementary students do stay within their elementary cohorts, even at math time. So the students will have the opportunity to take those math classes and be within their grade level, including 5th grade. And that maternity leave, we want to make sure that we're well prepared. As much as we try to plan ahead for the arrivals of a bundle of joy, sometimes that can happen unexpectedly. So we have extra staff in place to accommodate those needs.
Great. I think that gives our rising 5th grade families a strong sense of relief that lots of planning has gone before all of this, and that gives us some adaptability and flexibility to go as well. Let's dive down into just kind of where we see ourselves at today in our scale of returning a bit further. First of all, we've stated that this roadmap that we've shared with you is a living and breathing document, and I just thank you for your flexibility with us to understand that. I know that all of our BCS families have been extremely flexible with us since March, and that will continue, as we know that this new day we're moving into is going to be different than we've been in before, and yet we are excited about the planning that's taken place thus far and the hires that have happened and the infrastructure that's going to be in place. So let's talk a little bit about kind of policy decisions and what's going into that. And I'll start it off by just saying this. This is a unique campus, and the uniqueness of this campus takes into account that we have a house of worship here. we have a child care center here, and we have a school. And guidance for those three entities are all being taken into consideration as we are working towards policy level decisions. The great part about this is the child care center has been open through this entire pandemic, and they have been growing and developing and changing and learning through this process to ensure that children on this campus are safe, teachers on this campus are safe, and the whole of this campus in terms of facilities is handled extremely well. And so those lessons that we've been learning and the steps that we've taken in initiative are allowing us to be prepared for the school year, but it is an evolving situation for sure. And for example, this week, the Texas Education Agency just released on Tuesday their requirements for opening schools across the state. And so we'll be engaging with that material. As I stated earlier, there's a national dialogue going on about reopening schools safely, and we want to continue to take those into consideration. And so our policy decisions, as you've seen them, are information that we can provide to you today. It doesn't mean that it's an end point. This is just a starting point, and then we're looking forward to being able to provide more and more detail as we get closer and closer to the school year. So when the questions come out about what will the return to school protocols be, and will parents at different grade levels be notified if the classroom's quarantined, sheltered at home, we're like I said, having a very broad guidance at this point for the sake of being able to get in greater detail as we go forward. But pickup and drop off, we have made decisions on, and we've done that because the process by which we've been able to receive children in the Child Development Center has informed our decision making for the school-wide. So, Mrs. Jones, do you want to kind of give an idea of what that's going to look like here on our campus when we start school up in August?
Yeah, so previous practice had been that the majority of our elementary students all waited in the gymnasium together in lines, kind of organized by class, waiting on the school day to start. And looking at all the guidelines and expectations, best practices that are being recommended right now, we've adjusted that. You would have seen yesterday on the plan that was released that we've staggered entrances around the building and really trying to create a great system that is a convenience to families. We want to provide great customer service to you in the process of drop-off and of pickup, and have changed our plans from what they've looked like in the past in order to accommodate that. So all of our staff, their contracts and their workday starts at 7:30. In order to get all of our staff positioned in the appropriate places and to have the greatest security on campus, student drop-offs will start at 7:40 this year, just out of an abundance of caution and wanting to make sure that everyone is in place to conduct those no contact temperature checks in the morning and to have a safe environment for everyone coming in. Student drop-off will start at 7:40, so a parent can operate around our campus kind of like a traffic circle. I know that's not always a great thought in Texas, but there will be multiple parts of the building, multiple points where you can kind of enter and exit that drop-off cycle. So middle schoolers and senior school students can be dropped off under the north portico near the play zone. We'll have one entrance for kinder, first, and second graders. That's on the east side of the building, nearest to the cafeteria. And third, fourth, and fifth grade will enter through the gym. That puts them in the closest location to the staircase that they use and will allow them to not cross paths with those younger elementary students. They would be able to go directly upstairs and go to their classrooms in the mornings. And so that drop-off scenario does change the responsibilities of our classroom teachers in the morning. We have the habit in the past of offering some before-school tutoring, but at this point, we're really focused on trying to have the safest return possible. And so the services and different ways that we accommodate student needs, we hope to expand as the school year goes on. As Mrs. Chadwick mentioned earlier, we're starting the school year without visitors during lunch. And as we can safely return, we would love to expand that during the course of the year. And the same thing with morning tutoring. Right now, the priority is going to be the safe return of students to campus. And the best way to do that is to allow them to go directly to class in the morning. So morning drop-off, students will come to campus, have those temperature checks, and then be able to enter the building and go directly to their classes. We have staff stationed around the campus to help them be able to arrive in class safely and have monitoring.
That's great. Our media team's done a fantastic job of giving a map on this roadmap to return document to at least visually depict how that's all going to look, and we will give more guided information as to the traffic flow and what all that will look like, because in the mornings and then in the afternoons, it's gonna be a new challenge. But what we have found, and as I said earlier with the Child Development Center, they were picking up and dropping off 40 students outside of the building early in the summer and early in the spring, and now in the summer we've scaled that up to close to 190 students, and the infrastructure in place that's been happening has been growing with it. But what our families have found is that that's added an increased layer of customer service. They like it. They know their children are being treated well, and an increased level of safety and security. And those are two wonderful benefits of making these changes, and we see this as a change that will possibly help impact our growth in the future in terms of safety and customer service. So we like the changes that we're making and just preparing for how to scale it up. So we appreciate your patience with us, especially early on in the school year when we're just adjusting to the new normals. And I recognize that it places some additional strain on timing of work or pickup in the ends, but we would appreciate that you could help us work through these challenges together as a community.
Do you want to talk about dismissal?
So at the end of the day, we will have a staggered dismissal. So at 3:10, the plan is to start dismissing kindergarten through second grade students. And so the priority at 3:10 will be families that are only picking up children kindergarten through second grade through the same exit that they used as their entrance. That's really going to be wiped down during the day, and really trying to focus on that being for kindergarten through second grade at the morning arrival time and at dismissal time. We'll prioritize and have a line for families to come in and be able to pick students up kinder through second grade. This also helps to facilitate our after-school enrichment program, our ACE program. This will stagger the arrival of students from the elementary school into ACE, being able to pace that out and keep students in separate groups from one another. At 3:20, we will start to dismiss third through fifth grade. So if you are picking up a first grader and a fourth grader, that would be the time of day that we would want to start dismissing for you. You would be able to go around the building, be able to pick up the first grader from the cafeteria east door, be able to pick up the fourth grader from the gym door, and then can exit the campus at that time. If you're picking up a student from the Child Development Center, their traffic is going to follow that same pattern, that you could continue and pick up a student from the Child Development Center. You could continue that loop. The middle school and senior school will dismiss at 3:30, and they will come out through the north portico exit. So really, you can enter and exit that loop at the points that are relevant to you and the students that you need to pick up at the end of the day.
That's great. I just want to add a note that in terms of how we're going forward with this, there is a lot of guidance out there, and whether it's the CDC or the TEA or all of these other acronyms that are out there, are we as a school required to follow those to the T? The answer to that is no, but maybe the longer explanation to that is we are holding ourselves accountable to these levels of leadership in this country, because everyone is reinventing this new imagined school for the year to come. And so the best thing we can do is weigh into this level of leadership. And so we're thankful that we have that level of guidance. And so I would hope that as you're reading these documents yourself and learning, that you would spend time on quality research as well as a family. It can be easy to get distracted by maybe other resources that are out there, and I would just encourage you to stay focused on those areas of guidance. So that moves me into the next hot topic. What about masks? I've got my mask hanging here. I'd wear this and come to the building. I know this is a polarizing topic, but Mrs. Chadwick, we're going to weigh into this topic of masks, okay? So what masks are being permitted, and do we have to wear specific masks? And then maybe you can kind of even go into what we're thinking about for the 6 to 12, and then Mrs. Jones can talk about the elementary school.
Absolutely. So we did have a question, is there a specific mask? If we're required to wear a mask, we're not putting a specific mask requirement. If we were asked, can my child, he likes the gator type that comes up, that's absolutely fine. The requirement is it has to cover the mouth and the nose. And that doesn't include just pulling your shirt up like that. So the gator type, the cloth mask, the disposable mask, as long as they have plenty of those. Someone asked about face shields. Yes, but the school's not providing those for the students, but certainly anything that fits the guidelines from the government for face coverings will be acceptable. And talking about 6 through 12, since we will be changing classes, and we are going to stagger those class changes a slight bit, so we won't have all the students in the hallway at one time. We are going to have a designated traffic flow, so they won't be crossing over in front of each other as much as before. But during those times when we cannot have the correct social distancing outside of the classroom, going to the restroom, traveling to lunch, going outside, then they are going to have to wear a mask in those areas. For the classroom itself, we're following the government guidelines, which right now, it could change. It's going to change August 3rd. We know from the governor that what we have in place right now, he will come out with something new and revised August 3rd, so we're going to wait for those guidelines.
Thank you. That's so good. And I want to go to the elementary school in just a second, but I'd like to just make a comment that I actually heard the director of the CDC come out and say there are 3 powerful tools against COVID-19 that we have in place right now. The first one is physical distancing, and we're accomplishing that in a number of ways. But as you heard the description of the whole student cohorts, this is one effort that we're making to provide that distancing to ensure that the transmission's potential decrease significantly. And then, of course, the social distancing dynamics we'll share of greater detail as we get closer to the time. So that's really the first one. The second one then is that he said is facial coverings. And so these are powerful tools against coronavirus. And then the third one was just increasing practices of personal hygiene, specifically related to hand washing. And you know, as I listened to that, I thought those are just simple. And I like that he said those simple tools. And I hope that as a family at home, you're already helping to introduce these things to your children and to your family, because these are our new normal. And we've got to get used to how to live in a coronavirus pandemic, and we're all trying to engage in that way. So maybe you could give me some ideas for the elementary school, Mrs. Jones, in terms of masks.
Sure. So I would say the vast majority of our students in the elementary school are under the age of 10. The majority are under the age of 10. And although it would not be wise to predict the future, we can look retrospectively at the orders that we've seen both from our county and from the state. And at this time, they have not made it a requirement for children under the age of 10 to wear a mask. And so our desire as the school is to make sure that we follow by those guidelines that have come out from the government. We would not have any plans in place right now to exceed those guidelines. If a family's preference was to send their child wearing a mask or a face shield, a gaiter type that can be pulled up, those are allowed within the building. The same thing for our teachers. If the expectation from the state expires and is not extended by our county judge, if there's not an extension there, it would be up to the discretion of the teacher to make that choice for themselves. We would allow that to be used, a face shield or a face mask on campus, but that would not be a requirement. We have not seen that so far being a requirement for under the age of 10.
And again, as we've learned lessons, our Child Development Center is functioning during the summer program with elementary aged children and obviously preschool aged, and of course they're not wearing masks in their classroom, but our teachers are wearing masks as they're traveling around the building and they're working with the students, and then they take their masks off at the appropriate time. And there's some common sense practices like us today trying to communicate with you where we wouldn't want to have a mask on because we'd want to clearly communicate with you. And so I think there's some common sense practices that we can use during that time. So let's move on and talk a little bit about sanitation. I know that sanitation and the specifics related to sanitation, whether it's how we sanitize a restroom or our classrooms or what teachers will do during breaks or lunches and all of that, are being considered. I'd like to just have this panel kind of share your thoughts on how we go about planning for the sanitation coming. So I'm going to start with you and work this way for the answering of this one.
Okay. So far as sanitation goes, our plan has to be very comprehensive. We have one custodial team. We have one facility manager system that works and operates on campus. And as Mr. Myers alluded to earlier, we have the benefit of having a licensed child care facility that literally was only closed one day for a deep clean during the pandemic, but we've stayed open in order to meet the needs of essential workers and others in our community. So our whole campus plan is exceeding the guidelines from the state for a licensed child care facility. We are also exceeding the expectations for houses of worship, as well as the TEA, the Texas Education Agency's guidelines and recommendations from ACSI, the Association of Christian Schools International. And so that plan, I would say, is so comprehensive in nature and is meeting the requirements from so many entities and organizations that it is well thought out and very comprehensive in nature in order to meet the needs of all those groups. And we've talked about different ways that we can help and assist one another. For example, the church has purchased touch-free hand sanitizer dispensers that quite clearly will be used during service times, and they're already in operation on the weekends during service times for the multiple congregations that meet here on campus. But we've talked through that with some of the church personnel, that those can be repositioned and used within the school on school days during the week. And so there's a lot that we can do to help one another where everyone benefits, that we do want to operate as the body of Christ and not have one limb hanging off detached from everyone else.
That's good.
It's very comprehensive, and it's a partnership between all of us together to help each one of us succeed in the way that we are called as a part of the body of Christ, that each of us has a role to fill, and it brings glory to our Father when each of us succeed in the calling that we have.
Thank you. I was going to go to me, but I'm going to skip to you, and I'll just ask, maybe you could share a little bit about our conversations that we've had with Mrs. Schmidt, our school nurse, as it relates to just this topic specifically.
While I had a thought going on, so I'm going to do that before I go to, some of the questions have been about, what about lunch cleanup? Because those of you who have been here at Bethesda for a while know that we instill in our students a sense of service to the community and outside of the building, but beginning here inside of the building. And students have always been a part of our cleanup team at lunch. But we have reevaluated that for now, and there will be a staff who will be taking care of cleaning down the tables between lunch groups. So you won't have to worry that we're going to put a rag in your child's hand and say, wipe this table down. We'll be taking care of that. In the same manner, the classrooms, when the classes are changing, between class changes, the teachers will be wiping down surfaces. And we're going to do little things that just make sense. Leave classroom doors open so that door handle's not being touched 1,000 times a day, and wiping down those common surfaces of door handles or stair rails during the day. I would like to say I've been at Bethesda a long time, and those of you that have been here know that we've always focused on the cleanliness of the building, and things like the hand sanitizer in the classroom. That's not new to our students. That's a natural thing that they are used to. Going into the computer lab, and we have hand sanitizer dispensers, and they use those automatically. So they're trained in that, and I feel like we're ahead of the game on that. So for the nurse, we met with her actually yesterday, and she's been in a lot of training groups this summer from nursing organizations and webinars and things that we can do to create a area for children to come to when they're not feeling well. We are repurposing some of the space in the office to create a isolation room. If someone comes in running a fever, they will immediately be isolated. I don't know if this is the kind of thing you wanted me to talk about, but that's where my mind went with some of the things we talked about yesterday. What?
And to have a separate area if you just need a Band-Aid.
Yes.
Bumps and bruises in one area.
So we're making some major changes just in office areas and areas of the building, and following some new guidelines from the Pediatric Association.
Great. I appreciate that. I will say that these are some examples of the great collaboration that's taking place on our campus, and we will continue these conversations over the weeks to come. We know this is an evolving situation, but that frequently disinfecting surfaces and hand washing, increasing cleaning supplies on our campus, and having personal protective equipment in abundance, those are all things that are very important to us, and we're going to ensure are taking place for next year. We've even been talking about individual kits for students in the classes to avoid sharing school supplies. That's important for those high-touch surfaces to be avoided. And then just appropriate classroom arrangements, and again, we're not going to get specific on those details at this point, as much just to say that that is important, and we are taking the details of that into consideration. And then last, just that the options of kind of walkways and lining up in the hallways and the way we move about the building, all those things will be new, but I'm just thankful that we're able to already start to see this come into fruition for the year to come, and not be stuck in our thinking that we've been able to innovate and be able to reimagine and re-engineer like we've been talking about early on. And so it's not just this team here, but it's all of our teachers, it's our entire staff, and so we're excited to be able to present that to you. I'm going to move to another topic that I think is weighing on families and important, and Mrs. Jones, I'm going to have you jump off on this one. The whole topic of co-curriculars. Let's start there, because I know that there's been questions about co-curriculars, and so I think we can address it maybe in some more generic terms, but hopefully for some of the specific questions that will give the answers.
We see the fine arts and physical activity, all of our co-curricular programs, library, those are vital to the students' experience on campus. Those really are enrichment opportunities that create a well-rounded academic program. So I'm excited to announce the elementary co-curricular offerings are even expanding for next year. We just yesterday had a gentleman come in, Mr. Jeff Nichols, has signed a contract to be our elementary Spanish teacher starting next year. So we're even adding to that group as time goes by. Mr. Nichols has a background. He has served as a missionary in multiple countries around the world, serving as an interpreter at times and as a language teacher as well. In the States, he's taught elementary school, middle school, junior high, high school, and on a college campus. So he is well-versed and well-prepared, in his background and heart for missions we think will help to enrich the lives of our students, not only in understanding of language, but in having an appreciation for culture and what those different cultures can bring, and being able to relate to others in multiple parts of the globe. So co-curriculars are in full force. We have plans for those to happen in the fall and even expand them.
That's great, and I think with the co-curriculars, we've got some other areas to consider, like our after-school programs. Ms. Chadwick, do you kind of want to address how we're going about our thinking there?
I do, and I want to also tag off her about our band and choir and theater, because we've had some specific questions about those. And those of you that are involved in those already know that we are under TAPS, that we are a member of TAPS, and we're waiting for guidelines from them for choir and band. They've already put forth some guidelines for athletics. We are going forward full steam ahead. We have staffed a band, choir, theater. We're planning on that in our schedule. We're still waiting on the guidelines to see exactly what we will be able to do for those. But I want to reassure the families that we're still offering those classes, and they are in the schedules. After school activities like theater or athletics, students at dismissal time, if you are a current participant in a team or a theater, then you will be allowed to stay for that practice or game or event or whatever's going on. Otherwise, at dismissal, we're asking parents to please make arrangements to pick up your child if they're not a driver or don't have a younger sibling and are being picked up. In athletics, we are following the TAPS guidelines. There are days in the building right now where our basketball team is doing skill training, and I've seen them in the gym working. Our students are doing their strength and conditioning this summer, and they're following all the guidelines for social distancing that's been put forth from TAPS at this time.
Good, thank you for that. I can't reiterate enough, as we're talking about co-curriculars, how important this is to holistic development, and this is why we're seeing the guidance from the AAP and the CDC about returning to school, returning to on-campus schooling, because these are the things that for a child, when we are in home-based learning, we miss. It's impossible to have this level of robust curriculum without being together, and I sincerely understand the hesitation of getting back together, but I also recognize that we're weighing up these risks and options, and really what's tipping the balance for us is the health and the wellness and the social and emotional wellness of your children. And as we're thinking of those things and considering those, we know that that is going to provide for the health of your family. Let's face it, we're out of touch physically with each other. We have been for far too long, and as we re-engage, we're going to be able to see that some of the mental health issues and some of the physical deficiencies that have happened over this time are going to need to be addressed, and we're prepared to do that. Educators have been doing that in education for all of these years, but we're also going to be prepared for the balance between academic progression or regression and the mental health development of your child, because we want to keep those in balance together. We know that starting our school year this year is going to need to look different. It just has to. And we expect that we have a professional team in place ready for your children, and we're looking forward to evaluating those things in the beginning of the year and then doing what great teachers do, and that is getting started with helping your children move along the continuum of learning and teaching. So I'm excited for that.
So I want to go back, if I may, about the face mask. And one of the questions was, will they have to wear face mask in PE or at recess? No. We want them to be able to run and breathe. The gym is large enough, and the cohort groups will be small enough that they can use social distancing in the gym and be able to do their exercises and running and stuff without wearing masks. Absolutely. Outside is the best place to not wear a mask, and we don't expect them to be on the playground with their mask on. They will have different areas that they're going to, designated for different cohorts. And this year we are adding a planned, I hate to call it recess, let's say break time, for our 6th through 12th graders in the morning. It is a part of our schedule now. It is not optional. They will be going outside for some fresh air and a break time in the morning class.
Mrs. Jones, can you hit on why that is important? Whether it's 6 through 12, we know that we have recess for already for the littlest of those on our campus up through the 5th grade, but why is that even important for us to do? What is that benefit there?
Well, we know that we have to take into account the wellness of a child. It's more appropriate for children who have young and active bodies to be able to expend energy, both in a mental way in the classroom setting, but in a physical way during the school day. There are research and studies to show improved math scores and improved concentration, improved focus from students when they've had the ability to get up and move their bodies and to be able to physically have some activity during the school day. And as a part of that, our middle and senior school students are having that embedded into their schedule. We are actively working right now with the help of many others to create campus schedules right now, and being able to set that time aside and to prioritize. A lot of the recommendations that we're reading right now say outdoor space, fresh air, opportunities to be outside, and taking into account physical wellness to a higher and higher degree. We want to make sure that we embed that into schedules, and like Mrs. Chadwick said, not to make it optional. If you get the chance, spend a few minutes outdoors, but really to set that aside, prioritize it, and make it a great focus for all students on campus.
So along those lines, they should dress appropriately for the weather, cold, hot. We did adjust the dress code for grades 6 through 12 because we knew we were headed in this direction. And if it's cold outside and you watch the weather and it's going to be a really chilly day, then they better wear a hoodie or a coat because they're going outside.
That's good. I'm receiving questions as we're going, so I'm kind of scrolling through them as I get them. Sorry if I haven't addressed them right away, but I will come back to some of them. I do want to make sure that we have time to drill down into the virtual learning options and what that looks like as we're integrating into a modified return to campus. I think we need to provide some clarity there, so maybe we could we probably need to talk about it differently from elementary into middle school and high school. So do you want to start on the middle school, high
In
school
the
level?
upper grades, we're going to continue to use the Google Classroom platform just to keep our students familiar, and our teachers at least once a week will give assignments or require that assignments be turned in on the Google Classroom, so that if something should happen and a student is home for a self-quarantine or a cohort is home, it will be a seamless transition. We're actually meeting this afternoon with our technology director to help us figure out how to include classroom instruction in lifetime, maybe, perhaps. It may be recorded. It could be as simple as a flipped classroom where the teacher records a Zoom teaching and the student watches that at home and then joins the teacher in a Zoom meeting for a help questions study hall type thing. But we are planning on incorporating that from day one so that keep us sharp.
That's great. You want to share a little bit from the elementary side?
So, so far as the elementary goes, we know that all the recommendations right now are for on-campus instruction, and so our primary focus is to have students here interacting with one another and interacting with teachers. But as Mr. Myers said, you know, if we do have a diagnosis of a COVID case on campus, we would want that cohort. They would then receive home-based instruction. We would do that through Google Classroom. We would utilize Zoom as a resource as well, similar to what we did in the spring. There would not be a modified grading policy, so we would continue on with the grading policy that is in place. We want students to have the opportunity to have continuity, and so classroom teachers will be incorporating the use of Google Classroom while they're here on campus for students to be familiar with what is my password and where do I click to find my assignment. Teachers will be modeling that for students in their classrooms and then utilizing technology. Teachers can sign up to check out a class set of iPads and be able to implement that in the classroom and allow students to practice so that it becomes integrated into the practices that we do in the classroom on a regular basis. And if there is the need for a cohort to have home-based learning for a small quarantine window, it would be as seamless as possible in that transition. We would want the first couple days of home-based learning during that quarantine to be very rich in content and continuity for students and lessen the scramble of how do I log in?
Right. And so let's drill down on that a little bit more, and then we're just going to use some specific examples because I think the whole cohort / intermittent quarantine potential is something on the hearts and minds of our families. And so I'll use my own child and your child as an example because they're in the same cohort as rising sixth graders next year. And so if my son was diagnosed with COVID-19. And of course, we would hope that that doesn't happen on our campus, and it has not with our Child Development Center throughout the summer. But if that were to happen, then the process by which boxing in that the CDC offers means that the entire sixth grade class would have to quarantine for 14 days. Jaden himself would be isolated, but everybody else that has been in contact with him would need to then be quarantined for a 14-day period of time. And so that entire sixth grade cohort would then be quarantined and would be on the home-based learning using the learning management system tools that we have in place, Google Classroom, Zoom technology, from there. Now, there's also some other people that would need to be isolated or, quarantined, I'm sorry. That would include myself as his dad and my wife, obviously, but his sister, Mackenzie, who's going to be in 11th grade next year, she would need to go into home-based learning while the rest of the 11th grade class was still here meeting on this campus. And so our teachers are prepared to help navigate that, and that's what I was showing in the meeting before with Brent is we need to be able for a resurgence return or a hybrid return. And in Mackenzie's case, she would be in hybrid mode, but the entire sixth grade class would be in resurgence return. And that just shows the way in which this formula would work. And we want to be prepared for that. We also want to be prepared for, let's just say in the fall, as we get closer to Thanksgiving, for example, you're hearing some of the talk about a potential second wave when the winter months are arriving or the late fall months. And if there is a stay-at-home order, shelter-in-place order by the governor like there was in March, we want to be prepared for that as a school-wide too. And so this allows us the flexibility to be agile now. and so we can adapt and thrive through these circumstances as opposed to it shutting the entire campus down. And as we keep reiterating, this is campus-wide decision-making here because we have a church and we have a child development center and a school, and so we need to be very careful in the steps that we take and make sure that they're appropriate.
And even to increase the offerings of what we're able to do through home-based learning. We have encouraged our teachers, and we've set up some systems this summer to give them the opportunity to be licensed as a Google certified teacher. There are trainings available through Google Classroom so that we know best how to implement those tools. In the spring, we had a week of preparation of launching a full online program, and we are eternally thankful to our teachers and the families and the students and the agility and flexibility to really turn hundreds of people on a dime, so to speak, to be able to pull that off. But we do want our teachers to have a greater level of expertise, a greater comfort level and familiarity with the tools that are available and how instruction can be best offered through Google Classroom. And so encouraging our teachers and providing them with some staff development credit and the opportunity to do training over the summer. We've already seen staff members taking advantage of that and becoming Google certified teachers so that our own skill set and readiness is increasing should that be needed.
Great. Do you want to add anything to that?
I was just going to say on the secondary level, of course, like you said, last spring, it was like taking a drink from a fire hose. But on the secondary level, our department chairs are working with their departments to standardize the way things are done across the department. So the math classes will post the lessons the same and the same type of grading, and the English, we don't expect English to be like math, but it will be standardized across departments. And they have been working on that this summer.
Great. There are some questions coming in. I think we've done a lot of addressing how our students and our teachers engage. And there are some questions coming up, and I'd like to have both of you weigh in on this. But how are our parents going to engage with our teachers? We're saying that we can't have people coming into the building. We need to be very careful about the whole entrance and exit piece of it and essential workers only. So maybe we could just expand on how we see that interaction happening, because we know we're in a partnership with families, and of course our parents love interacting with our teachers. So, we've got a meet the teacher that usually happens at the beginning of the year, and we have different times where we do parent-teacher conferences, and those engagements are very important to us. How are we going to address those in this new normal environment?
We certainly don't want to reduce the amount of information and partnership that we have with parents, but there is the need for a reduced physical contact, and we need to separate the two. We don't want to reduce the relationship or the quality of engagement that we have with families, but we do want to make sure that we're continuing to have that safe environment on campus. I think we can do that through multiple ways. We are already talking through best practices of what Meet the Teacher would need to look like. Myself, I had a meeting with a cohort of other private Christian school principals yesterday, talking this through with, I think we had 10 or 11 principals that joined, and talking to them as a fellowship and saying, how is this working best on your campus? What have you figured out for your school, and what can I offer that maybe we have figured out and you haven't yet? And talking through scenarios for that. And we are looking at best practices of safety on campus that potentially that could be staggered in nature according to last names, maybe different time slots for people to come on campus. We want families to have the opportunity to be on the physical campus and be able to meet teachers in person to the greatest degree possible. And also have opportunities for families to continue to engage with teachers through parent-teacher conferences, that those in the spring for elementary families, we gave options. We did those some over Zoom. We did some of those as phone conferences. Some families, it occurred by email. And we want to continue to have the availability of our staff to hear from parents' hearts, to meet the needs of children, and to combine the efforts as we partner with the families to teach about the Lord Jesus and help to direct the hearts of the kids that we have the responsibility for while they're here on campus.
The same thing. We definitely, nothing is going to replace the face-to-face conversation that you all are used to every day if you pick up your children. Of course, we'll rely more on email and Zoom at the beginning. We always traditionally will have parent conferences with our sixth grade parents early in the year just to see how the sixth graders are adjusting to middle school and a little more freedom than they're used to. I think we'll still continue to have those, although they may be via Zoom instead of face-to-face in the classroom, just really close to each other. I think it's important to have times when different groups can come on campus and see what it's like. If you walk through the Child Development Center now, you would see normal activities going on. You may see temperatures being taken as students come in the building, but once they're here, they're in class, and they're learning, and they're having fun. And they don't realize it's not the normals. It's a little different. So at first, I think we'll be doing more Zoom meetings, or I know a lot of teachers already text or message back and forth with parents. We are still here for you. We are not shutting the door and cutting you off.
I'm glad you said that. I'd also just kind of like to reiterate on this. What I see this doing is actually opening up a window wider into our classrooms, not narrower. And so by us integrating this level of technology going forward, we're able to provide you as a family a greater look into your child's classroom. While it might limit the amount of physical time that you're in their classroom, we do believe that the measures that we're taking are things that are going to be long-lasting for us to just widen that window of viewability into your child's classroom, and we see that as extremely important going forward. We have a limited amount of time, and we do want to be respectful of everybody who has tuned in. We're promising to keep this close to 60 minutes, and so we're coming down onto that time, and I know there's been a few other questions that have been asked, but I do think we've gone far beyond in terms of addressing the entire scope of questions that we've received. But I would like to give an opportunity for each of us to maybe make some closing comments as it relates to just this platform that we're in right now and what we kind of foresee as the future going forward into the school year. And then we do want to close our time. I'll start with you, Mrs. Jones.
Closing comments. I would just say from the hearts of our teachers, we miss your kids, and we cannot wait to have them back on campus. And as a mom, I would say my own kids have been on campus this summer. They have been a part of the summer program here at the Child Development Center. They have thrived. My kids have enjoyed it. You know, they may not recognize that between the time when they used the play zone today and another class got to use it tomorrow, it was being fogged with sanitizer overnight, that those kinds of things are happening behind the scenes for the safety of the students. But they are enjoying being on campus, spending time with friends, building relationships with new friends that are here as a part of the summer program. And so I think I would just say as a mom, it's going to be a good year. I think we have lots of plans in place, and there will be parts that look new, but there's a lot of the familiar pieces of Bethesda. The heart of this place is the same. There's a great unity, I would say even potentially more than in the past, of the different branches and the different parts of the body of Christ that are operating within this facility in synchronized ways to bring about glory to the Lord.
Thank you.
I want to echo that. We cannot wait to see your kids again. I don't know how many were able to join us on a live Facebook for our commencement, but that was the first time for me to see the seniors in quite a while. And as a senior sponsor, I just wanted to cry because it was so good to see them and their parents. We are looking forward to your children coming through that door. And you know, when we look at, well, we have all these new policies and procedures and regulations. It's like being a first-year teacher. You start here and you can change and loosen up as the year goes on. It's hard to start way out here and then tighten back up. We're negotiating new waters, and we're traveling. We're going down the rapids, really, and it's going to change all the time. That doesn't mean that we don't want you here. We can't wait to see your kids. When I pulled up this morning, there was one of our alumni girls meeting with an adult, a former staff member adult, they were sitting outside, kind of social distancing, doing a little Bible study together. And I just
Love that.
wanted to run up and hug them. And of course, we didn't. But it was just so good to see that that kind of normal activity is still happening. We are still building relationships, and we still want you here and cannot wait to see you in just a few weeks.
Thank you. I guess I'd just like to close and say that as the newest member probably of this community, at least of the three sitting here, the weight of this responsibility is so heavy. And I have loved that I've been able to, as a leader, weigh into the strength of this community as we've navigated this forward. That the weight-bearing responsibility has not fallen on a single person's shoulder, but yet people have rallied as a team to pick up the slack where it needed to be picked up, to innovate when it needed to be innovated, to just bear each other's burdens in different cases. And so I am so thankful for these individuals sitting here, the individuals sitting behind this camera, and then you all who are at home and watching this, that as we are bearing this weight together, let's ensure that we are offering up our plans to our Heavenly Father and asking Him to just guide our steps as we go forward. Because I can tell you that back in April, it felt like every step was on unstable ground, and there's some of that now that is still the same, but many steps that we're taking right now feel like the ground is getting firmer and firmer as we get ready to go back into the school year. And I have great confidence that stepping into this new school year, as both of these leaders have reiterated, it's going to be a fantastic opportunity for your children and a great time for our teachers to really just be able to go to a new level with students in terms of their holistic development. And so we are excited about that. We're excited to see what the Lord's going to do, and we're excited to be partnering with you. So we thank you for tuning in today and engaging with us on this Facebook Live question and answer session, and we appreciate that you joined us, and we hope that you have a wonderful summer. We look forward to continue communicating with you. Have a great rest of your day.